Good morning, fathers of daughters. This is Ephraim B. Martin, and welcome to Grow That YouTube channel. Bienvenidos. Aquí. Gracias. All right, fathers, we are here today for another live stream. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And today's discussion, Grow Dads, Restorative Justice Practices. Now, a lot of you fathers may not know what restorative justice is or the practices of restorative justice. So that's what we're going to be discussing today, fathers, because there may be a point where our daughters may be a part of restorative justice practices at school. Let me kind of explain to you what restorative justice is. When I was a dean of students and teacher in middle school and high school, I was a restorative justice coordinator, and we used restorative justice in the middle school, in the high school where I worked. And the purpose of restorative justice is to repair the harm. What harm is that? Well, there's a lot of harms that happen in middle school and high school with kids. The transitioning for a lot of daughters. There could be a harm there. There could be a misunderstanding with other little girls. There could be emotional highs, emotional lows to where our daughters may not be getting along with other little girls. So there could be times where there could be tensions. There could be times where sometimes our daughters may be acting out in classes. They may become out of their character, which they're not normal to, and there may need to be an intervention. And what restorative justice does, and the restorative justice practices, what they do is it's an intervention. You have a actual person like myself. I was a restorative justice coordinator. You have a restorative justice coordinator in the school that may do a circle with kids or may do a one-on-one with children that are having conflict. It could happen with children. It could happen with children and administrators. It could happen children and teachers. So restorative justice practices, restorative justice, the process of restorative justice is a good thing. Now, a lot of times, depending on what school you go to, what district you live in, restorative justice can be used in place of suspensions. Once again, not a bad thing. When I was a restorative justice coordinator, when I started in 2003 is when I became a restorative justice coordinator. No, 2007. I take that back. I'm sorry. 2007 to 2010, I was a restorative justice coordinator. And very, very effective. The middle school I was at, I came into the building and had buy-in with all the teachers and all the administrators that were there. And I was able to bring down the first year suspensions about 90%. Because what ends up happening is when you're meeting with children one-on-one, restorative justice practices, it's a process where it's 100% volunteer. So it's not forced. And it's to get resolution. Bottom line, it's about all about resolution. And a lot of times kids just don't know how to speak with each other and have a discussion with each other, and they may request restorative justice. So once you get familiar, your school gets familiar with restorative justice, it's an amazing thing with kids. Kids automatically will come to you and ask for a restorative justice intervention. And like I said, the elementary school where I was at, and it was implemented, that's what ended up happening with kids. They found themselves needing interventions with other children because there was the potential for a conflict. So they would find me, come to my office and say, Mr. Martin, I would like to have a restorative justice intervention, which was a beautiful thing. And it's very rare that you're going to find the child on the other side who is part of the conflict not willing to be a participant. It's an amazing process when it's done correctly. And I have to emphasize that because restorative justice practices and the restorative justice process has to be done correctly. If not, it's not going to work. It just isn't, because kids will not buy into it. And I've done restorative justice one-on-ones with children, one-on-ones with teachers, one-on-one with administrators. I've had assistant principals and principals come to me and say, you know what, Mr. Martin, I'm feeling some tension with XYZ student or students. How about we do a one-on-one intervention or even a circle within the classroom? So it's an amazing process and how it works and what it looks like. And like I said, being a restorative justice coordinator and being able to implement the practices of restorative justice, it's a beautiful thing. So I have some videos that I want to share with you today that explains what the restorative justice practices are, what restorative justice is, and the process of it. And it could be used to replace suspensions, depending, once again, your situation in your school district, your school. The good thing about restorative justice process and the practices of restorative justice, it's a very, very fair and neutral process. It's not about taking sides. It's about getting to resolution. And I can tell you, 99% of the children that participate in restorative justice and the practices of restorative justice feel 100% better after, because they feel that their voices are being heard and they just want to understand the conflict itself and why they're going through a conflict. It's not a physical thing for most kids. They really want to resolve, and the only way that most kids can resolve is by having a neutral party, an adult, and telling their side of the story and letting the person who brought the harm to them hear how they feel. So it's a great process, okay? So fathers, I want to encourage you to process these videos I present. They're all fair use videos, and Grow That YouTube channel is all about education, instruction, and sharing, and making sure that all fathers are better equipped and better informed so they can become better fathers. My book, Daddy's Girls, can be purchased at Amazon.com. I'm currently in the process of completing an ebook that I'm going to sell directly to my subscribers and my followers, or anyone else who may be interested in purchasing my book. So you could either get the physical copy or you can get a PDF copy. So hopefully within the next week, I'll have that done and I'll have it placed through the description on all of my videos, and you could purchase it directly on a PDF if that works better for you. Okay, fathers, let's get started with this first video. This first video is on restorative justice and the process of restorative justice. Okay, fathers. First video, fathers, restorative justice process. And what is restorative justice?
Becoming a victim of crime is often a traumatic experience. Many victims feel that their life has been turned upside down. What was once normal and familiar no longer feels safe. And the criminal justice process can be daunting and complicated, leaving those who have been harmed feeling excluded and in need of answers. Restorative justice can change this. Restorative justice gives victims the opportunity to communicate with the offender, to express how they have been affected by the crime, and gives the chance to have unanswered questions resolved. Restorative justice is completely optional, and it can only happen if both parties agree to take part. And any party can stop the process at any time if they are not comfortable with it, or if they just need a break. And restorative justice works. The vast majority of victims are happy with the process, and reoffending rates for offenders who take part in the process are exceptionally low. It's not about passing judgment, it's about repairing the harm that has been done. With a unique process which allows those taking part to regain a sense of control, drawing a line under whatever has happened, so they can look to the future and move on with their lives.
Since the process, I'm no longer a victim. I'm really glad I did it.
We felt like somebody actually really cared about us for the first time.
It really affected me. I saw the effects of my actions. Everyone has the ability to change. Restorative justice helps people move on with their lives.
Okay, fathers, that was the introduction of restorative justice and restorative justice practices. And why am I so excited about it? Because I was a restorative justice coordinator. So this is what I did every day when I came to school. And it was kids are very, very forthcoming because it was a new process for the majority of the kids where I was. So the middle school I worked at was 95% Spanish speaking. So I ended up learning Spanish through immersion at the school where I was a restorative justice coordinator. So it was a beautiful thing. But the process itself is beautiful because you can also do it within the community. And there's going to be a video that talks about that and what that looks like. And this next video is going to go a little bit deeper into the restorative justice process, what it looks like, and how kids participate in it. And like the video said, the process of restorative justice, if it becomes uncomfortable, it can be stopped during the process. There's no right or wrong when it comes to that. When it comes to suspensions, what we did was if there was a fight, that was an automatic suspension. Part of reinstatement back into the school, whether I was at the middle school or the high school, was the students had to go through restorative justice as part of the reinstatement. So it was a great process for kids to have to go through to come back to school. So very exciting. And like I said, I have all my reports, yearly reports on restorative justice, and I'm going to share them one day just so you could see the effectiveness of restorative justice and how kids did through the entire process. What's cool about it is once a child goes through it, they tell their friends about the process, and it just becomes automatic. It's one of the most interesting interventions I've ever had to work with because I worked 20 years in the criminal justice system. I'm a former state of Colorado juvenile probation officer. So I didn't have the opportunity to use restorative justice then, although I was an advocate for children. So being on the back end of the criminal justice system, I wasn't able to use restorative justice until I got on the front end of education. And so it was very it was an amazing process. That's all I could say. And once I became a dean of students, I was a restorative justice dean of students. Although I was over disciplined, we did have a restorative justice coordinator at the high school and middle school where I was a dean of students. So worked out perfect. It was a win-win for the kids. And the whole school it was a beautiful culture. It was a beautiful process. And every teacher participated in it and had no problem referring kids for, we used to call it RJ, Restorative Justice. So it's a good process. And like I said, when adults participate in it and they see the results of it from children, it's an easy sell. It's not something that you have to convince kids to do. It's a part of their DNA to want to resolve. Kids are not in conflict. Kids don't want conflict. They want resolution. So it's a beautiful thing. Okay, let's get ready for this second video. It's going to go a little bit deeper. So let's see. Let me get it set up here. Give me a second. Okay, fathers. Video number 2.
Restorative justice is an approach to building community and responding to harm, with roots in indigenous traditions. Schools across the country are applying these strategies to manage classrooms and create inclusive, socially connected, and supportive learning environments.
DC is facing a lot of transition in a multitude of ways that really impact our community. We're facing retention. We're facing the evaluation system of teachers. We're facing gentrification. We're facing poverty. We're facing violence.
Restorative practices can be used to address many needs in a school. Proactive practices include community building, academic instruction, and social-emotional skill building.
As a teacher, I try my best to think of restorative justice as a way of communicating better with my students. So every Monday we had a morning circle. So whether it was just a check-in for about 5 to 10 minutes, we use it as a proactive circle.
The idea is that they're creating a community within their classrooms that everybody feels accountable to. And so when things do go wrong, they come back to the circle and they're able to discuss it in a way that helps repair any damage that has been done to keep things like that from happening again.
We are teaching children to advocate for themselves and the communities in which they will eventually serve and lead. By allowing voice to the conversation, we're teaching young people that your feelings are genuine and important.
Well, before I did the program, I didn't really feel comfortable talking in front of a lot of people and telling them, expressing how I felt about stuff. But when I started the program, it's easier to be open and, explain how I feel about a certain topic.
Responsive practices bring together those involved in a significant incident of harm to understand what happened, agree on how to repair harm, and rebuild trust.
Schools are really rethinking, what does discipline mean and when does it need to be utilized and for what purpose? We realize that a student who is outside of the school is not learning. And if we continue to exclude students from their learning environment due to discipline, we continue to put the students often who need us most further and further behind. Restorative justice has been used as an alternative to exclusionary practices by really thinking about how to restore the harm that was caused to the community. Sitting at home never restores the harm. It never allows you to sit across the table from your peer and talk about what led you to the actions that you did. What we've learned is that in schools that are implementing restorative practices with fidelity, it's often not the students who need changing, it's actually the adults in the building.
This work
really required me to be reflective about the things that I say, things that I do, and how I interact with kids and adults.
A lot of times with restorative justice, someone is offended and there's offenders. But a lot of times things are misconstrued because of miscommunication.
And it opened the conversation and dialogue for students to begin to talk to one another and resolve conflict effectively.
You just see what's going on, but you don't know what's actually going on in a person's life or like what they're going through. So it's like, be open and hear people out.
Part of those restorative practices training is learning what your biases are, so that you aren't using your bias as a way to punish, as a way to exile, and not be inclusive.
In one of the schools that we work with, a Caucasian student, stated to a student of color that they didn't belong at that school because of misconduct in violation of rules. And what we were able to do was have a conversation with the staff about what was our feelings about, hearing that and what work needed to be done. Gentrification is an issue in DC, and what does that look like? What's the impact on the community?
If you have no prior knowledge of dealing with someone in a certain culture, you come with your own preconceived ideas. Same thing with children with learning differences. Again, you can come with your own ideas behind ADHD, for example. That child doesn't know how to be still.
Restorative practices ensure that students who experience trauma receive vital support to address harm and make necessary connections to academic and social services.
The trauma cycles from generation to generation. But what we see in the classroom, anger, depression, and with kids, especially this age, the depression looks like anger.
We have children who are helping parents with babysitting. We have children who are seeing abuse at home. We have children who have drug abuse going on at home.
The use of RJ practices can be used to help students who have experienced trauma to be able to talk about that, to be able to share their experiences. I think for a lot of students, the beginning of an emotional release and emotional healing.
It helps with that key element of bringing humanity back into the schools, assisting with the belongingness that kids are struggling with at this stage of life. How restorative justice helps with that is just acknowledging that, sure, you made an infraction, you made a mistake. We all make them. You're not that mistake, you're not that infraction.
If you did something, it's probably something that's like at home or somewhere else, and it's not even the school. It's just, that's how they reacted, because like some people keep stuff in, some people don't talk, some people like vent. So different people handle their issues different.
We have to bring humanity back to education. And I think that's one thing that's really missing. We're looking at students like a number, which is replicated in our justice system. I think when we're able to do that, I think we'll actually see the positives. Like it is painful in the beginning because you have to do some stuff that you're uncomfortable with.
What is a challenge to restorative implementation is not only mindset, but time. It is much easier to send a student home by writing a letter and attaching it to the child's file for a suspension. And I think that school leaders have to position themselves as to what is the greater investment of time. Is the greater investment to do the quick fix that continues not to work? Or is the greater investment to spend the time up front setting the conditions for long-term success that actually will sustain you into the future?
Restorative practices reduce suspensions, expulsions, and loss of instruction time that have a disproportionate impact on minority students. Restorative practices also increase teacher retention, create a positive school climate, and improve student satisfaction and safety.
When I first got here, this was the most challenging middle school, and DCPS had the highest suspension rate of every other middle school in the city. We are now, I would say, at the top where the schools in the other part of town who don't have discipline issues, we rank up there with them as it relates to school climate and culture.
Okay, fathers, what are your thoughts on restorative justice and the restorative justice practices and the restorative justice process? That was an incredible video. So I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. I was a restorative justice coordinator. So all the adults that you just saw in this video, speaking the truth. See, you don't have to sell restorative justice because it's a process that works. It's definitely an indigenous perspective. That's part of the indigenous Native Americans, aka Indians in the United States of America. This is what they practice. It's indigenous to them. So it was a peaceful process. Let me give you a couple of examples. I'm going to go a little bit deeper with the restorative justice and how I was effectively able to use it outside of the school as well. So when I was a probation officer, I worked in an all-white county, Jefferson County, Colorado, lily white. All my schools that I supervised, where I went and had kids, they were all white kids. And then when I became a teacher, dean of students, all of my children were students of color. So I've worked with thousands of kids from all socioeconomic backgrounds, cultures, and religions, right? And the interesting thing about restorative justice, we actually had situations at the schools of color where we had kids that were in gangs. And their gangs were requiring them to do certain things. And they would come to us and say, you know, Mr. Martin, our gangs are requiring us to fight other kids and initiate and things like that. So, not involving law enforcement. In my criminal justice background, I would contact these gangs and ask them if they'd be interested in doing a restorative justice. And to my surprise, they were. They were part of the process outside of the school. So some of these kids have deeper issues than just being at school. They are tied to gangs. And their gang members are their family. That's the reality. So we cannot isolate gangs or gang members because they control a lot of these kids because they're part of their family. They are the family for some of these children. So, like I said, without involving law enforcement, I've never had an issue with reaching out to any other human because of my professional background. 20 years I worked in the criminal justice system. I came across a lot and I saw a lot of stuff, a lot of bad things. But the one thing I always did as a probation officer, I was a student of my craft and I paid attention. So, although I wasn't able to use restorative justice practices as a probation officer, it was an easier transition once I got into K-12 education and was able to use it there. So felt blessed about it, felt good about it. But as you can see with the adults, restorative justice, it's not a hard sell. And a lot of legislators, they think it's soft. They don't like the process. A lot of them want to see punishment. Well, you can punish out all you want, but at the end of the day, they have to come back into that environment in which you punish them, and there has to be a transition back. I would rather have a peaceful resolution than to try to get 100% compliance and obedience, because that never works. I can tell you that. Working with thousands of kids in the criminal justice system and K-12 education and their families, punishment can only go so far. If there's not a transition back where the kids can see there's a resolution, they're not going to trust the adults that are in charge of them. They're just not going to do it. That has not been my experience working with thousands of children for over 30 years. Okay? So I know what I'm talking about here. and I support and will always support restorative justice and the practices of restorative justice because RJ works. Point blank, period. It works. And you're speaking to someone who was a restorative justice coordinator and participated. So that was an excellent video. I'm glad I came across it. The videos that I share with you, fathers, I watch all these videos myself a couple times each to make sure that the education and information I'm providing to you will help you make better informed decisions as fathers. I'm a resource. Grow That YouTube channel is a resource. Okay? The next video we're going to talk about is restorative justice being used outside of the educational system. This is a great video as well. Let me get it set up. Okay, fathers. Video number 3.
A Slice of the Community is made possible by the support of the First Horizon Foundation.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Slice of the Community. I'm your host, Jerome Moore, and today we're joined by founder of Unheard Voices Outreach, Raheem Buford, and community organizer, Reverend Janet Wolf. How y'all doing?
Pretty good. How you?
Great. I'm ready to dive into this conversation about the power of restorative justice, right? Before we get into that conversation, I want people to really understand personally and professionally why that topic in particular is important to both of you all. And so I'll start with you, Janet, on why the power of restorative justice is important to you from a professional, personal level, and what that means.
We actually decided that Raheem was going to go first.
Okay, Raheem, go ahead.
Okay, well, fine. That works for me. So from a personal level, I was introduced to restorative justice while I was in prison back in 2002. At that time, Harmon Ray, may rest in peace, had given me his book on restorative justice where he had written it with someone, Marion, I forgot her name. But as I went back into the cell and I read about restorative justice, I began to think about the version of justice that had me in prison. And so I said, if this were the way for this country, people who cause harm would understand that it's not because they're bad people, but because things happen in people's lives and they do bad things, but that's not who they are. But even more, then healing will be a part of that process. So from a personal perspective, one of the reasons why there continues to be so many problems socially is because we're not healing from the harms that are caused in the community. But from a professional perspective, I don't think much about it in that context because I don't see myself as a professional. I think it's all personal because I subscribe to the idea that I'm a part of a community. So restorative justice is a way of doing community justice for me.
Janet, now it's your turn.
Now it's my turn. So I remember I was teaching, and one of the students that I knew, his mom moved, didn't tell him, he had no place to go. He ended up being part of a robbery. Then he was tried as an adult. And there was a long story, but I remember being behind a school bus one day, not long after I'd been in court with him, and thinking, this is going to end up in prison. I mean, this is the criminalizing of young folks. They, so many don't have the opportunity to be who they are. They're so shaped by all that's happening in the community, the lack of resources, the kind of battering from systems, the belittling that happens so often at school. And so that tried to figure out there had to be some other way. So way back when, I was trained as a mediator by Victim Offender Reconciliation Project, which I'm not sure exists anymore. But so we did community mediation, and it was challenging and transformative. I mean, that there was a different way, that justice is not about vengeance, it's about healing. Justice is not punishment, it's about setting things right and trying to figure out how that might happen with the input of everybody who's impacted by whatever went down.
Now, what happens, and I'm gonna come to you with this one, Janet.
Okay.
What happens if we stick strictly to a punitive system and not pivot more so to a restorative justice system?
You increase the harm.
What is
You increase the harm, you increase the violence, and it's much more expensive. I mean, that what we see in, and we call it transformative justice because we're trying to change systems and communities, looking at what are the underlying causes that created the possibilities for the harm to happen in the first place.
Raheem, as a person that has literally been in the system, prison system specifically, is that a realistic approach for the system to change to a restorative justice system, especially at the adult level?
It is a realistic approach, but I'm not so sure that it's a system approach. It's a community approach where the people have to come to a realization that if we want real change, real transformation, because certain things can't be restored, then the people have to make that decision themselves. For example, if in my community someone commits an act that we consider to be a crime and someone is harmed, I should not have to seek beyond that community for a remedy. But as of now, the state somehow through its laws decides what justice is going to be. And often it has no healing, it has no transformation, and the people who were harmed do not even receive treatment of any sort. So it's real for us to do it ourselves. And it's real because if we want to reduce recidivism, which is like upper 70% all across the United States when people get out of prison, if we want to reduce what we call crime, we have to have a different model, because the model that we have now, which is retribution, meaning a form of revenge, it is miseducating people, misinforming people, thinking that if someone does something wrong, we have to make them feel pain. That's incorrect.
Janet, did you want to speak to that? Did you
I
want
was
to
just going to say, our friend Preston Shipp is coming out with a new book this month, Confessions of a Former Prosecutor. And he talks about how, as a prosecutor, under this state-sanctioned vengeance, he simply looked at the number on the case, what law was broken, who broke it, and how to punish them. Had no clue about who the person was.
Right.
And no idea about the damage this was adding to the harm that had already happened. And possibilities for alternatives can be really simple. The last church I pastored, we trained our teenagers in restorative justice and mediation. And we did community meetings. So someone whose kid's bike was stolen could call the church and say, hey, I want the bike back. I don't want it to get stolen again, but I want to call the police. Because when you call the police and you put a juvenile with a criminal record, they're 50% more likely to end up in an adult prison.
So that brings us to the community part. Personal story, right? I have a 3-year-old son, right? He's about to be 4 in May. And this happened maybe less than a year ago, right? We're playing. And he says, you're bad. You going to jail.
Oh, ouch.
What?
Yeah.
You know, so being in this work, it made me look at like, hold on, wait a minute. One, where did you learn that at? Like, where did that, like, why am I going to jail? Why is that already being taught to a 3-year-old that didn't come from me, right? And so it makes me think about, from a community standpoint, where do we start to shift in policing, or prison or jail is not the first response to discipline,
Right.
even with kids. And a lot of this, this school to prison pipeline we talk about, a lot of that behavior is taught unintentionally or intentionally in our schools, from getting demerit, suspended, and then you expelled, you kicked out, those type of things. How do we correct some of that stuff that I think also plays a part in this system that we're talking about that is punitive and not restorative?
Yeah, I think we talk about the cradle to prison pipeline because we think that kids are targeted from the day they're born in some communities to end up being criminalized and caged. And I think the alternatives, there's a wide variety. We were talking about earlier, it's about language, it's about culture, it's about relationships, it's about building both transparency and safe, brave space for folks to come in. One of the things that Raheem was part of was organizing with young folks in schools to create different models in the Metro public school system. And it was things like a kid would come in with a hat on. The teacher says, take your hat off. Keeps walking. I told you, take your hat off. Keeps walking. And now they're going to suspend this 14-year-old from school without ever asking, what's happening with you today?
Right.
Turns out his brother was shot the night before. He's coming into school with all this hurt. It shows up. And there's got to be room wherever we are in our communities to recognize the trauma, to invite some kind of listening that moves us to a different place. Did you want to add?
Well, I was just going to say, we have to create different avenues of listening for our young people, because a lot of the behaviors that our young people engage in, some of it they learn in the environment where they live and at home. But for example, we were just talking about how we have to start doing circles and having conversation, listening to see what the kids have to say. There's so much going on inside that we never really take the time out to listen, even to the parents who are so frustrated. We were talking about poverty earlier and how that overwhelms people so much to the point to where they never really get a chance to internally breathe, right? So when you present a different model of what it means to address a disruption, to address what we may call harm, this is foreign. So when we create language to have conversations where young people can see that there are alternatives to how I can respond rather than react to a moment, this has the ability to transform.
Now, we talk about youth, and we have a practicing restorative justice approach in our juvenile system here in Nashville, but not in our adult system, right? How is that approach different, right? Is there limitations to restorative justice, especially at that adult level, depending on the harm?
Well, Refy Institute that defines justice as healing and does the work in juvenile court creates the alternative, so there is no criminalizing, there is no caging, there is no record if the person goes through the process and completes all the requirements. But they're also working with the DA in Memphis for 18 to 25-year-olds.
Okay.
I mean, it is possible to deal with forms of transformative justice for anything that happens. It becomes harder if it's murder or rape, but it's possible.
All right, because when we talk about murder, those heinous crimes, it's difficult, I think, as Americans, the way I think we're conditioned with punishment and harm to say, hey, you just killed my sibling, you just killed a peer, a friend of mine, I want to take a restorative justice approach. It's hard for many of us to hit that switch. People that are watching this are probably thinking that I don't know if I can take a restorative justice approach in that case, but how can we get to the point where we look at ourselves and why are we conditioned this way as human beings to automatically say, hey, I want you to feel the same harm, or I want you punished? Can we unlearn some of those things?
I mean, we see people unlearn that. Did you want to say?
No, you go ahead. Keep saying. No, I want you to
we see people learn that in the circles that we do in the community conferencing, in the
Right.
mediation. Because in a courtroom, folks who are harmed don't have much say. They can't decide how the person is charged, what the punishment should be.
Mm-hmm.
They have very little part in the whole court proceedings. In the transformative justice, they have a voice. Their voice matters. The way they tell the story matters. They come with a support system. They're part of a community. And they get to define, what does repair of harm look like? What do you need?
Right.
What's going on?
2 examples. One, Rafia Muhammad, whose son was murdered. And almost like the instance after it had happened, she face to face with the person who had taken her son's life. And at some point, she came to the conclusion that I'm not going to give another child to the criminal legal system and not even know what the fate of this child will be. But what she did do is, like, there has to be some accountability. They contacted Clemmy Greenlee, and they asked, would she be someone that would be a part of this process, right? And this young man has been given a different justice than myself. I was given a life in 20-year sentence, right? Another example, my sister was murdered in the year 2000. And that was a very tough time, because prior to that, I didn't even know what it felt like to have such a disruption. And I remember looking at my sister in this casket. I got chains around my feet, around my waist, around my hand, and I'm looking at her. And I had a moment where I came to this conclusion: this is what you did to somebody else's family. So I get back to the cell, I get on the phone, and my mother is like all over the place. Your brothers, them, they about to try to. I said, put him on the phone. I said, look here, I can't stop you because you're going to do what you want to do. But if you do anything that's going to cause more harm, you're saying that I deserve the same thing as the man who took our sister's life. So we have to uplift real life examples of what restorative transformative justice looks like, no matter what it takes. Because until people can see that human beings actually can endure this type of the magnitude of this kind of loss and come out of it human.
All right.
The system, inhuman. These are the difference: humanity and inhumanity. That's the choice that we have between restorative transformative justice and retributive justice.
Let's visit that word justice, right? Some people even like to refer to our criminal system as the criminal legal system or criminal justice system. But some people who don't believe that, quote unquote, we have a justice system refer to a criminal legal system.
That's the term we use.
That's the term you all use. What does that word justice mean? And have we experienced justice? Do we have a justice system?
We don't have a justice system. That's a really easy one to respond to. I do think Cornel West says justice is what love looks like in public. And the roots of justice for any kind of transformative, the circle process, are old. They're ancient, from indigenous peoples, from Aboriginal peoples, from many places in Africa. This notion that when one person is harmed, the whole community is harmed. And so what is it that it takes to set things right? That's just. That's just. It's putting pieces back together in a way that everybody is healed, that life becomes more possible.
So it was a misnomer to include criminal justice system to begin with, because it implies that an act that is fair, that is balanced, is going to take place through a process, right? And what I found out is that in the criminal legal system, justice is defined by the process. When you were arrested, did they read you your rights? You have opportunity to get an attorney. You can go to trial. Various things of this nature. That's what justice. It has nothing to do with who was harmed, has nothing to do with right, wrong, morality, anything. It's just a process, right? But when you think about restorative transformative justice, you're thinking about human beings and what they had to experience and what you can do to bring about some kind of healing. What's interesting about the indigenous culture is that they don't have a word for offender. You know what the term is?
What is it?
Unhealed.
Mm.
And so this is what happens when we replace language that does not include humanity. And that's what English does, or the system does. It removes humanity, it replaces it with language so that now these are no longer human beings. You don't have to concern yourself with how they're being treated. And so when we say caged, we're not talking about prison, we're not talking about incarceration, but we are. You get a different image.
Right.
But when we talk about love, how does that express itself among people? The system doesn't want love.
I mean, one of the things we've seen, Raheem and I are part of an organization called SALT, Schools for Alternative Learning and Transformation. And we've trained mediators on death row. And it changed the culture, right? Because if people begin to believe that community is possible in defiance of this belly of the beast and the systems that are pushing to separate and criminalize, if we believe that's possible, then people begin to invest and they listen differently. They hear what's underneath people's words. They begin to value what other folks are trying to search for in creating a safe place for themselves.
Why is it crucial and important for those who have been a part of the system when they return home to participate in that restorative justice approach? Raheem, you're a great example of that. But for those who may have been in the system, encaged, that are watching and listening to this, why is it important for them to also now participate and build community power for those that are currently encaged or in prison today?
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways that I can answer it, but the most simplest way is that people can be redeemed. Transformation can happen. And when people like myself are released, the accountability factor is not like we got so much in time. No, it's that I feel as a human that I did such a bad thing that I'm gonna prove it to myself that I can be reconnect to this community and be a positive force in this community, and that all those people that you still have caged, they have the same potential as myself. I'm not better than them. But for the way that we arbitrarily continue to make these laws, the life sentence that I paroled, you have 2,700 people with a different kind of life sentence that will die in prison if we do not change that life sentence back to a 25-year possibility. It doesn't mean that they'll be released. So me being out here is saying that if he can change, they can change too. We just have to remove that fear, which is false evidence appearing real. And the system has a monopoly on that.
And I think there's another part of it, which is the people who struggle the most are the people who have the solutions to what's gone wrong.
Break that down.
Well, so I've been going into prison since 1975 and I still get it wrong. And anybody who's been caged will tell you that because that's not my experience. And so if we want to know what healing looks like, particularly for folks who have been part of this violent system, we need to listen to the folks for whom that's a firsthand experience.
Right.
Philadelphia is a restorative, part of this Restorative City initiative. And part of my work has been starting think tanks inside prisons. The folks I knew in Pennsylvania, Graterford Prison 20 years ago are restorative, transformative justice facilitators in the streets of Philadelphia. And the goal is in every neighborhood to have a facilitator who can create alternatives, visible alternatives to calling the police, to locking somebody up.
I think that wraps back around like to what role can community members play? Because 95, 98% of the people that are encaged return back home, right? But a lot of times we understand that that's barriers to the workforce development, that's barriers to housing, that's barriers to being able to just be a contributing community member. And a lot of that has to do with the current community members not wanting to help heal or be a part in the healing process. So there's community members watching this, right, that may feel like, hey, there's some crimes that people are not redeemable, right? Even if they come back home. How can we shift that mindset around community? How can they participate in making sure Raheem, when he's released, hey, Raheem, I know you're struggling with this, but let me be a part of that healing for you, because I know you're having a hard time getting a job. I know you're having a hard time finding housing. I know you're just having a hard time connecting with people because there's this label on you now. Even though you quote unquote paid your debt to society, I'm still not going to, that debt is really never fully paid.
Yeah, and you can't force people in America to behave or think one way or another. But I'm thinking about faith in this context, particularly from the Christian perspective and the beloved community. When you can open your heart up to someone who is considered to be a sinner, someone who has committed wrong, and see yourself in that person, then maybe you can change it a little bit. Because see, we have to understand that a lot of society, majority of society is harmed too, is hurting, is dealing with trauma. And so a lot of the times it's the mirror effect. It's really not their humanity that's addressing or responding. It's their unhealed feelings. So we got to create facility, have conversations, sit face to face. This is what restorative transformative justice can do in these conference circles. And we are actually listening to one another. I need to hear your pain, and I need to keep my mouth shut.
Right.
You see, and then see what happens.
Janet, 30 seconds closes out.
Oh, I don't know about 30 seconds. I think that the question is, what does healing look like? We can see that things are broken, that damage is being done, that violence is escalating. So the question is, what does healing look like? I would really encourage everyone to go sit in court watch, just see what's happening in the criminal legal system. Look what's happening, especially among youth. And the capacity for alternatives. So this is too long, but Raheem was part of a community program where we worked with high school kids who learned everything from restorative justice to yoga to politics. And it made a huge difference for someone to see, to value, to affirm, to welcome, to say, man, you're gifted, in defiance of a school system that's dumped so many of our kids in the streets.
Well, I want to thank both of y'all for having this powerful conversation.
Thank you for your work
around restorative justice. And thank you all at home that's watching, and tune in to the next episode of Lights of the Community. And I appreciate y'all.
Okay, fathers, what are your thoughts on that excellent video? That is an excellent, excellent video. It was almost 30 minutes long. It's 26 minutes. So thank you for staying and participating. And I've watched that video today, so this is my 5th time. And I've learned something totally different every time I've watched that video. And although I have the professional experience, I'm still in school. I'm still in school. I've always considered myself a lifelong learner. So that's why my craft has become the craft that it has, is because I'm a student of my craft, always have been. And I'm just all about solutions, period. I don't care where the solution comes from. I don't care what culture it comes from. I don't care about the person's color of skin. I don't care about the person's religion. If it's a solution, I'm in. So excellent video. And as you can see, when you start talking to ex-convicts and those that are in the ministry. And, you know, one of the things as I experienced is when you're talking about children repairing the harm, they're interested. And I do believe that it's up to the community, because when you're talking about violent crime, some individuals want a resolution by facing the perpetrators one-on-one. They do. And I think it's their right to be able to do that. But what is the process to get there is the question. Because we already know what happens with violent acts. They have to be punished. They do. If the perpetrators and victims want to be part of that process, though, for a resolution, we have to honor that. Whether we agree with it or not, we have to honor it. And I think when you look at the human element of it, it's hard for most humans to be forgiving. It really is difficult, specifically when it's an act of violence against a family member, against you. You know, when you are a victim, you've been victimized. You don't want to become the victimizer, though. You never want to become the victimizer. So it's important when you're a victim and you've been victimized, because you could become the victimizer at some point without resolution. So excellent video. I have two more. The next video is on peace circles and the explanation of what that looks like. And then one more video after that, and we're going to wrap up this live stream. Thank you, fathers, for participating. Let me get it set up, fathers. Okay, fathers, next video.
The peacemaking circle process is a way of bringing people together to strengthen relationships or to talk through difficulties, to resolve conflict, or to plan together. The circle draws from ancient ways of coming together, but is also shaped by complex modern societies and ways that we incorporate that. When we are all sitting in a circle around a center point, it creates a sense of common focus. It creates a sense of connection. Everyone is included, and there's an equality in that form. We really want to create a space where each person can speak their truth, that they can show up in an authentic way. And that circle's not looking to pretend we don't have differences or to paper over differences, but to help us explore what's our shared ground that can honor the differences. The talking piece ensures that every person in the group has a chance to speak before anyone gets to speak twice. That the space is always created for every voice, every perspective. When one person has harmed another, which is sort of the place in which we begin to think about restorative justice, there's a deep commitment to treating everyone with dignity and to deep truth-telling. So the space in which we can still hold everyone in dignity and have deep truth-telling is a space in which it becomes possible for victims to be supported and validated in the harm that they experienced, and at the same time to create the space where someone who caused harm can own up while still feeling held with dignity and respect. Each of us gets the chance to sit in whoever we are, including the painful places, including the joyful places, but we're not alone. And this is the underlying dynamic, right, of human life, is that we are born into a tension between autonomy and belonging. We need to feel autonomy. We need to feel power in our own lives. And it's this very, in many ways, very simple form that is this structure that disciplines us to sit in that balance of our autonomy and belonging.
Okay, fathers. The only way we can get better as human beings, as fathers of our daughters, as fathers of our children, is through education and information, through instruction. A lot of times we don't know what we don't know, fathers. And what I do here at Grow That YouTube channel is I go a lot deeper because of my professional experience, because of my personal experience of raising 4 adult daughters, 36, 30, 26, and 24. I have 4 adult girls. So we don't know what we don't know. And when you look at my live streams, when you look at my videos, I'm going deeper than most people can go because of my professional experience and personal experience of the criminal justice system and K-12 education and being the father of 4 adult daughters. So I've been there. And this is what I do for Grow That YouTube channel. This is my way of giving back to all fathers, because I want to see all fathers have a great relationship with their children. I want to see all fathers have a great relationship with their daughters. It's important. It matters. So we know what we don't know, fathers. And through education, information, and instruction, that's how we get better. Another excellent video. And it's okay to be human. It's okay to become human. It's difficult a lot of times. Imagine having to sit in a circle with a bunch of strangers you don't know. Are you vulnerable enough to do it? Are you confident enough in yourself to trust other individuals that you don't know? So it's a deep process. It's a very, very deep process. And it bothers me when legislators and other people talk about how the RJ process is soft. It's not soft at all. Actually, it's very strong. It takes very strong humans to want peace, to want understanding, to want resolution. It takes a very, very strong human, because you have to become vulnerable, which most humans don't want to be. All right, fathers, we have one more video and then we will wrap up this live stream. Let me get it set up.
In my
Okay, fathers, last video.
In my opinion, restorative language is about one thing: avoiding secondary behavior. Is everybody familiar with primary and secondary behavior? Okay, so the primary behavior is Johnny is standing on this table over here. That's a primary behavior. Johnny's standing on the table. And so when I say, hey, Johnny, get off the table, Johnny right there is going to have a secondary behavior. Now, the secondary behavior can be Johnny getting off the table and going in and sitting in the seat quietly, or the secondary behavior could be like, Mr. Oliver, make me. That's a secondary behavior. Now, the primary behavior of Johnny standing on top of this table is not going to get Johnny sent to the office. That's not how it works. You generally do not send the student to the office for the primary behavior. But when Johnny challenges you and says, Mr. Oliver, make me, now Johnny is very close to getting sent out of that classroom because Johnny's secondary behavior has challenged your authority, and basically Johnny has become disrespectful to you. And not just disrespectful to you, but disrespectful to you in front of all your students. Here's the thing about the interaction you're having with Johnny in this moment. Johnny, you have to win. Johnny is feeling the exact same way. Johnny is feeling he has to win for all his peers. His pride is on the line. Because if he just gets off the table, he's going to have to hear, ooh, Miss Oliver just made you get off the table. He's going to have to hear that. Now, they may not say it to where you can hear it, but they're going to say it to Johnny. They're going to make fun of Johnny. They're going to snicker at him. They're going to do all those different things. And so Johnny's thinking about that. So Johnny is going against a whole different thing than you. Johnny is reacting for his pride, but also for his peers. I don't know about you, but when you were a sixth grader or a seventh grader, or you were getting into those teen years, your pride and your peers are more important than anything else in the world. I'll take 3 days to not be embarrassed in front of my friends. I'll be a legend if I get sent out of class over this. So yes, Johnny is going to react in an adverse way. And we can sit here and say, well, kids are supposed to respect adults. Well, newsflash, things have changed. Kids don't automatically just respect us anymore. And what we really get into in a lot of cases is really fight or flight. What we cause, by the way we interacted with Johnny, by yelling at him, saying, Johnny, get off the table. By doing that, we've invoked fight or flight. It's either going to be fight or it's going to be flight. Now, some kids are going to retreat. They're going to get off the table and they're going to go and sit in their seats and they're going to be quiet for the next 15 minutes and feel bad about what they just did. And you got some kids, a lot of them just like Johnny, they're going to fight back. And when they start fighting, or just like with any other fight, somebody has to give in at some point. And in a lot of cases, we feel that we can't be the one to give in. So what I would say is, why can't we find a better way to get Johnny off the table? Because wouldn't it be better, or would this be more effective? Hey, Johnny, can you please get off the table? I'm really scared you're going to get hurt. I'm really scared you're going to hurt yourself. And then we give Johnny an opportunity to get off the table. That's in a non-threatening tone. And that's giving Johnny the opportunity to save face and just get off the table. And if Johnny just gets off the table and goes and sits in his seat, isn't that what we all wanted? Johnny doesn't have to save face. You don't have to yell at him. And then we get to move on about our day.
Okay, fathers, another successful live stream. That's live stream number 48 since July of 2023. Feeling great about it, fathers of daughters. Feeling great about it. My YouTube channel continues to grow organically. I am blessed. And I'm feeling great about it. So live stream 48, fathers of daughters. I live stream once a week, either Saturday or Sunday, depending on my schedule. But I live stream every week, fathers of daughters. So I appreciate you. And we'll have another live stream next week. This was a good one. I'm happy. Hope you're happy too, fathers. If I can be of any assistance, feel free to reach me through my YouTube channel. My email is available there. If you have any questions, any concerns, always feel free to comment, fathers. Love to hear what's on your mind, what you got going on. That's how we do it. That's our commonality as men. All right, fathers. Until next week, you know the routine. This is F from B. Martin. I'm out. And I'll holla at you next week. Peace.